unfortunate.
Well, I know we get a lot of questions about like, when can my family move with us, in the pipeline, and how often am I going to see them, and all these specific questions. And I think it's difficult sometimes for me to be like you're not going to have time. So like people will be like, oh, I heard there's rumor that Pope is going to turn into a PCS, right? For the combat controller and SR guys, or especially combat controllers. It's like, hey, can I move my family from San Antonio to Pope and then move again to Hurlburt? And it's like, hey, like some of these questions are like, you got to figure out if it's better to have your family with you, or better to just like, hey, stay in San Antonio, and then we'll all go to Florida together and minimize the number of times you're moving. And also like understand that while you're at Pope, like you think your wife just wants you to, or husband or whatever, wants you to come home every day and just like be covered in mud and be like, I got 6 hours to clean all my stuff that I just dragged into your house, off base, to clean it all, to catch a couple hours of sleep. I'm going to wake up early, pack it all up, back up. I'm going to leave a mess, and I got to go back to training. Like,
yeah. It's not like, hey, I'm going to be home at dinner at this time.
Right.
No. Like, who knows? Maybe somebody, didn't tape their bottles correctly. Yeah, that's right. I said it again. Tape your bottles correctly. Mark your gear. Yeah. But I mean, like, you never know. Oh, yeah. Well, and then the cadre saw us doing that, and now we got smoke for the next 2 hours. That's why I missed dinner.
Well,
and PCSing is super stressful too.
Yeah.
Super stressful.
During that time, you're building these relationships with the team. So then even in your off time, you got all these knuckleheads hanging around the house. Like my house in Kirtland was ridiculous. Like there was a bunch of good stories. Like so our team was terrible. I've told this story a million times. Our team was awful, right? So we got locked down to base. We were wearing BDUs. Like if you left your house, you had to be in BDUs unless you were going to the gym. Like we got in so much trouble, right? But what that meant was like, it was Halloween. I was not allowed to take my kids off base to go trick or treating, and I had to walk around in BDUs. Like that was the game that we had to, and people, my spouse at the time was like, are you effing joking? You're a grown up. You're like the NCOIC of the team, or you're, she was like, you're a grown man with children. I want to be able to take my kids to go trick or treat. And I'm like, nah, I can't. I'll get in trouble. Like I'll get smoked. They'll make me do push-ups over it. And it was I know kidding had to ask him like, hey, can I get approved to go off base to go grocery shopping so that my wife doesn't have to drag the 2 kids to go do it? And no kid, I won't say who it is, but there was a PJ that looked at me and no kidding with a straight face was like, well, you can go to commissary.
Yep.
I'm telling you, like it was, and man, of course there were awesome stories, right? We used to have a poker game that ended up being like 40 cones would show up over to our house. Our house became, no kidding. I woke up in the morning, one morning, I walk out in the living room and there is a PJ that is still a PJ to this day. His name's Michael. I love him. He's amazing. He's sitting there like munching on a bagel with my daughter. They're watching cartoons. And like my daughter is telling him about the cartoon and he was totally into it. He was like, oh yeah, that's tight. And he's just munching on this bagel. And my wife at the time was like, how many dudes slept over here last night? And I was like, I think 6. I was like, but they got the kids up. Everybody everybody's good. They're hanging out with the kids.
Everybody pitched in. It's all good.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, of course there were those good times. Or, one time my wife we were locked down to base. My wife made Thanksgiving dinner for an entire team of dudes. Like, I think we had 25 people just show up and she made magic out of lunch meat because she's amazing like that. But so of course there's going to be those good things, but you were living that life. Your life is not your own. Like everybody's going to be involved in your relationship, good, bad, or indifferent for that time.
Yeah. Well, and if your spouse is like a scheduler or an organized person, like nothing is ever going to go to plan.
Nope.
Like I'm supposed to go to jump school on these dates. Is it going to happen? Maybe. Same with SEER, free fall, dive, whatever. And then it's like, we're supposed to start this course on this time and graduate this time. Like we're supposed to have these days off. Like none of that is ever going to happen. And guess what? Like when you get on team, it only gets worse. Like,
yeah.
Remember I've talked about it before, every time coming off a team and people being like, we have federal holidays that you don't have to come into the office. It's like, oh yeah, there's like days of the month and week that matter to people. Like on team, there's none of that. Like
days do not exist. You're so right. Like, what day is it? It doesn't matter. And then you get on team and you're like, wait a second, we get the 19th of June off. Like we had a 4-day. I listen, guys, I don't want to highlight how long it takes us to produce an episode after we actually record it, because apparently that's a thing. But newsflash, we don't put them out right away because we have lives and we do this as a secondary function. However, you know, we have a 4-day this weekend. It's amazing. You don't get 4 days in the pipeline. that ain't a thing, baby.
No. I mean,
on team,
a lot of times, even on team, like actually, like, you know, once you get to a unit on team, sometimes there's like, you're talking about, we had a 4-day. Yeah. Tracking, we had a 4-day. Guess where I was yesterday? Working.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, it's not a woe is me kind of thing, but it's just like, hey, when you're taking care of the mission, you're taking care of people, you're making sure you're prepped and ready to go, because like going back to, I know we joke about the, hey, tape and mark your gear appropriately and line things up, but that's in preparation for once you get to different points on team. And now is making sure that I am prepped and ready to go and setting myself up for success on Tuesday when I go back to work. Or that doesn't mean that I'm not going to answer some emails this weekend too, you know, or some text messages about questions. It just happens.
I don't know how many times in my life it's been, you know, Sunday afternoon, and, you know, you're kind of figuring your day out, and I'm, you know, looking at somebody and going, okay, well, hey, I got to go into the office just for a couple hours, or I just got this one thing to be ready for work tomorrow. Yeah. Like even on normal weekends, you're doing stuff the day before. You're like, I need this piece of gear, or we're training, or it's an early show, so I got to go in and make sure everything's ready. So just a couple hours, and then you spend 5 hours of your Sunday at the unit prepping gear or getting stuff ready or whatever else.
You got to stop that though. Like, I mean, it is reality. It is, but you got to minimize that, or you bring the kids in. Like if you got kids, bring them in. They love being around. They love being in the hangars and running around the cages and all that kind of stuff. Anyway.